Well, we're talking about, I guess, easy description is the sense of awe, and that you could actually use in the sense of the word overwhelmed,
Mm.
but we're not. We're not overwhelmed. So it's just a really nice feeling to become kind of at one with everything.
Yes, see, it would be overwhelming, except the part of you, the I that could be overwhelmed, necessarily has to have
Oh yeah, I get what you're talking about. Yeah, right. That it is in fact overwhelmed. It becomes insignificant compared to the big it.
yeah, yes, and just I suppose how that dimension once or when it's open in practice, sort of contacting it in daily life, and letting that space emerge and letting that sense of awe manifest again and again and again as you're going about your daily life.
Hmm.
And I know I said at the beginning of this conversation that I wasn't going to do what we did in the perhaps last group of times we spoke about this space maybe a year ago, which is try and pin it down conceptually. And yet at the same time, I sort of, on the one hand, it's like I just want to trust this space and just let it sink in. And like that's the process that happens. This space just sinks in and deepens and enmeshes more to the point that that overwhelm is almost, in the positive sense, continuous. And it seems like
Often enough,
often enough. And maybe that,
and it's delightful when it comes.
yeah,
This is actually the reference of the delight in the Dhamma, where things are so delightful you possibly couldn't harm anything.
mm,
This is the result then of one's uh, unification of mind. But when we're unifying the mind in this way, we're actually unifying the whole universe.
at least as it presents in the mind, right? At least as,
At least as it feels like from the outside of being a very small part of something else that's extremely, really big.
yeah.
And yet, there is definitely a place, or let us say a niche, in that for great joy.
Mm,
It's just to be at home. Finally, we found our home, I guess, is a way that we can say it also.
mm.
Is everybody's a traveler trying to get back home, and that concept also feels, uh, let us say, conceptualizing it back to the bonding of a baby with its mother right after it's
Mm.
born, and the nurturing that we get from our mom.
I think I've heard some descriptions, sort of scientific descriptions, talking about like processing and pre-processing and how this sort of state, um, well, it's actually, you don't need to, it can be described in scientific, in a kind of scientific neurological way, but it's also, I think it's what's described in Paticca Samuppada as well, right? This is
Uh-huh.
the it's like the earlier stages of, well, it's like consciousness without all the perception and all the sankharas and all the volitions and all the um, suffering that can arise from consciousness. It's
Hmm.
like consciousness at a much
Oh,
earlier,
we could go in so far as to say overly processed consciousness,
yes, that it's
trying to
kind
make
of
too
like
much
without,
of what we get out of it instead of letting it all be there.
yes, And I suppose it's consciousness that's not conditioned by ignorance as well, right? Because in Paticca Samuppada, ignorance is what conditions it all. Whereas this is
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That in fact, in a way, that we condition it by processing it with perception to make sense out of it. Because when we see it and make sense out of it, then we kind of own it. But what we own is what we sensed in the sense of making sense out of it, or the
mm,
salayatana, rather
mhm,
than what we really experienced. And so, in what we're talking about now is the state to where we're not processing any particular thing, trying to make sense out of any particular thing, and then it all comes in. It becomes part of the input of the senses, um, which is actually referred to in the various places of uh, the fourth fourth jhana, in the states of that. For instance, um, when they talk about boundless consciousness, what that means is that the amount of input that's coming in is no longer bounded by our ability to process it because we're not trying to process it anymore.
mm.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, that sense of boundlessness and like how it ties in with the sense of letting go. Like it feels like when, because that's the main way that if I'm using like a technique, it's just like the idea of like letting go of all experience as it arises. You're just continuously going, just like letting it go, and that letting go, that process feels very. It feels like what gives rise to that sense of boundless expansion.
hmm I'm thinking now of it's actually in a song, and in the song it says, "Just enjoy the show." And yet, what we do with our whole lives and the whole show is, in fact, we become critics and we criticize it. And we criticize ourselves and we criticize the world, we criticize other people. We're critics all the time. And a critic is not there to enjoy the show,
Mm.
he's there to criticize. And so he's looking for what's wrong. And this is also in line with what Shakespeare said, that all the world's a stage and everyone is a player. Okay, so here we are with our old script. We're reading our script, the Sankara script, the script of all of the stuff that we've collected together, and that it's either a passion play or a tragedy. And that the whole idea then is we get off the stage,
Mm.
and then we can sit in the audience and just enjoy the show. If we can actually enjoy the show instead of
Mm.
being a critic in the show.
Mm. Maybe we can even occasionally glance up at the sky as we're in a Shakespearean open
That's
roof
part of
theatre.
the show. Yeah, that's the show. Hey, yeah, man, it's all there. The whole show. That's what I'm talking about. Not just the stage, but the whole show. And we become an observer of the whole show without picking apart one little thing to get our attention on something and then go find fault with it and then go grab something else and find fault with it. And that's how we've been trained to do our whole lives.
Mm.
That's Western education for you. Trying to make everything better by fixing what's broken. And we wind up, yeah, we got a nice technology, but everybody's miserable.
Mm.
Everybody's unhappy. And all they have to do is remember that everything's going to be all right. And then we have to stop paying attention to the things that frighten us because not afraid anymore. So
Mm.
that's also a key ingredient is by just simply being out of bad feelings. We're inviting ourselves to be in that really, really good feeling. And the really good part of it is that expansive feeling.
Mm. Mm. And
So
it is a very when it comes into relation with other people, like when you can still, when the taste of that space is still there, or the kind of the inner expansiveness hasn't gone, and you're with
right.
other people, you're in a very kind of gentle, loving place, because that.
Only then can you do the metta that is so highly advertised.
Mm.
And that metta that we're talking about also was the very state that uh, Jesus was referring to.
Yeah.
Um, but in that sense, he was talking about Abba, not in the sense of Yahweh or a personal or a mono God, but that which is about us, the above us, that which contacts us. And that when we merge with that, it's an expansive quality. It is like being in heaven.
Mm.
And it also has the qualities of the fourth jhana, as I was saying, in the sense of when perception becomes very, very loose and consciousness is overwhelming, then we lose sense of the bound. We're not even thinking about the human body, that we're, you know,
Mm.
lost in space, kind of. And if we fully detach so that we're completely in it, then there's nothing left.
But
Just literally nothing.
do you think I should try and work like systematically with that?
Yes, systematically enjoy
Yes.
moment by moment. Systematically develop with the same gladdening thoughts that we've been using and add a few more gladdening thoughts like, wow, this is nice. Oh, what a wonderful world.
Mm.
Everything is going to be all right because you hear the expansive quality. Everything is not, okay, well, we'll get by this time, is not the opinion. Oh, no, it's everything's going to be all right. So thinking expansively, having expansive gladdening of the mind terminology.
Mm.
Here I was doing it and demonstrating it right in front of you, and then you ask. Yeah, so we begin to have expansive thoughts.
Mm.
We begin, in fact, to drop all of the boundaries in the sense of there's actually listed the four of them.
Mm.
And that the representation, I don't know if we've talked about this, it's been a while since I mentioned it to any student. And that is that we set down all of our defensive weapons.
Mm.
We stop bearing the cross, okay, and a sword with a hilt or any of that kind of stuff. So we put down the crossbow. The second thing is that then we fill in the trench,
Mm.
okay, and then uh, the the next one is uh, that we lower the banner
Mhm.
so that we're not identifying with this and that, and I am this and I am that. You can see how all of this becomes very expansive, and then we unbar the door.
Mm.
Okay, so now that means that I guess the door to the heart or whatever like that, and then now we're open. We've lost our boundaries. We've lost our identification,
Mm.
um, and we've lost our fear because we're not defending anything anymore. So we can think of it in those four terms
Mm.
to help you get into that state. But
Mm.
yeah, We don't need that mode anymore. We don't need to lock the door anymore. We can join the. We can enjoy the show.
It's a lovely metaphor that I remember you did speak to me once, tell me that metaphor a long, long time ago. It's very nice. Um, it's
And still, it depends upon sati.
yeah.
We have to remember these four things and remember to speak expansively. To keep talking to ourselves over and over and over again. Keep telling yourself everything's going to be all right. Oh, what a marvelous place this universe is.
Mm. As off cushion kind of ways of training the mind into that unguarded open state. Is that what you're
Hmm.
describing? Yes.
Right. We train the mind in doing these are all skills to be developed. How many times have I said this? Okay, yes.
Because
That
on
it's not something that you stumble onto
yes.
on a regular basis. It's something that you stumble onto once, and then we go back and we recreate this. And the Buddha's given all of the instructions needed to do all of this stuff.
Mm. Because on cushion, like once that space opens up, the self talk it doesn't become necessary because it's like the mind is inclining towards that opening and you just point it in that direction. And if Sati's there to kind of catch you when maybe you move out of that direction and Sati just gives the gentlest nudge back, then that
The
process.
gentlest nudge is when there's enough effort. That's like uh, starting a fire when
Mm,
you've got the right equipment is really, really easy.
mm,
A bioelectric and a gas lighter, they're very cheap. But fires were so difficult to start in the time of the Buddha, and I remember as a Boy Scout that there was a lot of work, a lot of effort in getting a
yeah.
fire started. And so, if we have the right tools and the right skills, then we can do it a lot easier. That a professional firemaker knows really what he's doing and how to do it, and he's really good at it. Most of us, we stop doing it when we fail the first or second time. We never learned how to do it. But now it's really easy because we've got the right equipment, got the right tools. Unfortunately for the mind, everything is mental, and so we have to develop the tools that we need, or
Mm,
the skills. And the first one to come is sati, naturally.
mm,
And now the gladdening the mind. So this is the part that you're asking about, and that is with now we're going to go for expansive thoughts, really, really high quality kind of things that make people swell up in tears.
mhm.
Like Satchmo singing, "What a Wonderful World." Okay. So this is the kind of thoughts that we begin to develop and begin to have. We set that mood, and as well as the fact that we've already been in states that feel really, really good. And I would imagine that what we're actually doing inside the brain is we're developing at least a sufficient amount of cortisol, which is that bonding chemical. It's the way that a new
Um,
molecule
Not
switches in
cortisol.
circuits.
Cortisol's the stress chemical.
Oh,
Oxy.
no, right. Oxycodone. Thank you. Again, the old brain's getting old now. Exactly. Exactly opposite. Boy, like concentration and samadhi being opposites. Yes. But anyway, that mothering feeling of being, bonding with something,
Mm.
being being really in it, being really there, being
Mm.
part of all, and that's the way that we're investigating. That's the attitude. Also, the attitude is expansive.
Mm. I reckon this is probably the way that babies are experiencing the world all the time, is in that pre-processing place. Like, that's probably neurologically what's
Well,
happening.
that's what we really love about the babies is when they're in that Gucci stage, and that goo goo gaga, and that gurgling happy baby. Yeah, that's it. And then we beat it out of them intentionally because of our culture.
Mm. Well, it's I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a bit like, it's probably why the story of the fool and the Christian story is so compelling, is because it like actually speaks to this human experience of lapsing from this sort of perfect heavenly state where you come out of it. But it's interesting because that development that a baby goes through is necessary to become a adult human being, but it's just sad that somehow in the process of that we are not able to hold on to um
In a way of speaking, this is the story of Adam and Eve.
yes.
In the sense of we get kicked out of our paradise because we are taught to think critically.
Mm. I
And so
mean,
we become critical of the world.
yes.
That's the division, cutting it up and saying this is good and this is bad. And what we're doing now is we're letting the universe become paradise because it gets all back together again.
Yes, but we do, as a species, right? We need, and as you know nodes
As
within
a
that.
species, we're pretty messed up. Well, actually, the humans by themselves are okay. It's the programming that we've used that we call human culture. That's the problem.
Yes, but that thing of the discriminating mind, right? The part of the mind that goes like, this berry will poison me, I won't
Hmm.
eat. This berry will not poison me, I will eat it. Like, we need that part of our mind. So we need that, the critical discerning part of our mind. We just need to use it a little bit more skillfully and possibly a little bit less.
Yes, right, exactly. A whole lot less.
Yeah. And in more appropriate circumstances, and within a framework where that's just one part of what the mind is able to contact and the mind is able to do and be.
Well, if we get into it, then it's really, really worthwhile
Mm.
to just experience that everything's okay. If we talk ourselves into it and keep telling ourselves that, you can actually feel that when you tell yourself that. This is the connection between the chitta and the Vedana,
Mm.
or talking ourselves into feeling good. Okay, so now we're talking ourselves at a very, very high level, high class, into feeling good at a very, very high class, the top of humanity. When we're in that state, then the Brahma Vihara, that is in fact the Brahma Vihara.
Mm.
And in that Brahma Vihara, that high class way of feeling in the moment becomes um, our home because we
Mm.
are at home. We recognize that we're at home. This is finally I'm home already.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because the Brahma Vihara is normally started with metta and end with upekkha, right? End with equanimity. Whereas this way of approaching that state starts with equanimity, the equanimity of like letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go, letting go. And then from that spaciousness, the metta and the compassion and the mudita, like that is
Right.
much more apparent. So it's interesting. It's gone at slightly the, that this way rather than this way.
So exactly. So it's all taught upside down in the sense of sila, samadhi, panya, but
Mm,
in ordinary culture, it's that we're given a set of rules. We're given a set of precepts, laws. This is how you do it. Okay, so we're raised on that.
mm,
And so that's the mindset that then takes on metta. Oh, you should have metta. This is how you
mm,
do it. Step one, two, three. Everybody sits down and practices that. And some, very rarely, but some people really get, ooh, like that when practicing metta, but that's quite rare. To where the other way to do it is that working through Anapanasati and the Eightfold Noble Path and developing the seven factors of enlightenment. That's when we have those seven factors, the Sambhojana, is when that's actually the description of that state that we're talking about with its constituent components. That
mm,
it's got unremitting joy. I mean, it's like, wow. And peace and at rest and uh, being able to think straight and things don't overwhelm us and because we keep remembering to look at what's going on and so we have energy with that. So those seven factors are actually the Eightfold Noble Path when it comes to completion of right view and right sati and right effort. Now the effort is effortless if we get it right.
mm.
It's really like just opening the door and let it all come
Yeah,
in all by itself. I love that
yeah.
haiku. The grass grows by itself. You know that haiku. It's um, sitting here, nothing to do, no place to go. The
Mm.
spring comes, the grass grows by itself. So that's right effort when it's really right effort, when it's a factor of enlightenment, and everything takes
Mm.
care of itself. So an easy way of looking at that is, oh, I want to go join Black Lives Matter or something like that. Why do you want to go join Black Lives Matter? He said, oh, well, we want to go out and protest in great numbers. I says, isn't there already a whole lot of people in great numbers out protesting? And what advantage will they have if you go out there too? Remember, what do you want? What's your desire? And if your desire is to make the world a better place, then go join Black Lives Matter. But in fact, the world's a wonderful place. This is a wonderful world. It's the fact that I don't like the same thing that those people don't like doesn't make us all correct.
Mm. Although I think people can approach that activism from a less unhappy place, because what you're describing is like people approaching activism from a
An
maybe
enlightened position, to
mental
really look
space,
at it.
a mental space which is not going to be very conducive for their happiness and well-being, and therefore other people's. Whereas there are examples of people approaching the idea of societal change from a really beautiful, open, non-violent, non-aggressive perspective, and that has produced wonderful changes which have opened up people's lives and enabled more people to have dignity and peace and whatever in their lives, right?
Well, that's what the Buddha had in mind, but we can only spread joy and peacefulness with joy and peacefulness, not demonstrations and protest. Protest by its very nature is violent. That we
Yeah.
can agree with what they want as an outcome, that in fact, if you are out there with them, then your job would be directly to spread joy to them
Mm.
rather than joining them. For them to walk down the street, I guess, singing, "Oh, what a wonderful world."
Mm.
That would be hard for some of them.
Well, for a lot of, well, what a lot of people are contacting is the reality of, uh, well, it's the difficult thing, isn't it? It's like how to hold the that open, glorious perfectness.
I wouldn't call it that.
Perfectness
We'll
isn't the right word.
criticize you.
Well, no, but at that space we're talking about, there's nothing wrong in that space, right? There's nothing wrong there. I mean, I take it that that space that we're describing and that is pointed at with some of the factors then of the fourth jhana as it opens up. It's the same thing that like the non-dual traditions like Advaita or like or like Tibetan tantric traditions, they call like the pristine mind, the like perfect, what do they call it? The anyway, it's often described in like theistic or terms, right? Like
that's that's actually much more of a Western interpretation, um, looking at those as deities or beings.
mm,
A better way of looking at them as um, visual images
mm,
of someone who is enjoying the states that we're talking about.
well, almost like
Right.
it's a
So,
theistic metaphor for
well, it's a pictorial representation. What kind of picture are you going to have? I have an answer to that.
God. Well, that's nice with the snakes, with the seven factors of awakening around him.
Yes, the seven factors of enlightenment, but you see that ordinary people will see that as some sort of magical being
Yeah.
rather than the seven factors of enlightenment. You see, the whole idea was is that the Buddha was sitting up at night in a rainstorm. And so he called upon the seven factors of enlightenment to give him cover.
Mm,
And he called it a naga because that's, I mean, a big serpent or a very effective, powerful thing. But calling it a naga, we can leave it as metaphor without it having to actually be magic because the seven factors of enlightenment, the Sambhojanga, is real.
mm.
Okay, so that's if you can go into the demonstration and the protest with this.
Yeah. But what I was getting at was that they're in contact with that dimension of experience, and then coming into the world of samsara, which is full of really fucked up and awful things and injustice, and you know
Right. How
how
are you going to give a picture of it? What's your picture? How are you going to have a piece of art or something like that, or a physical representation? And you already know that your audience is magically thinking, magically inclined anyway, so why not just have it a pictorial thing of a magical being that's enjoying the states that we're talking about?
mm,
And so those are actually, those takas were originally used as objects of meditation.
yeah, no, I get that.
Probably quite effective also. If you understand that you're looking for, let us say, the attribute behind it.
Yes, because that's it, isn't it? The Deity Yoga is all about envisaging your. First of all, it's about visualizing the deity and seeing,
Each
like,
deity has a quality. By
yeah,
visualizing the deity, you're actually consuming and becoming that quality.
yes, and then you visualize yourself as the deity, and
But
you.
the Christians, they don't do that. I think they did hundreds of years ago, but they've stopped doing that completely.
Hmm. Well, yes, they did have an idea, Catholicism, imitatio Christi, I think. So, like, they had this notion that, like, you'd imitate Christ. Maybe that's a not dissimilar idea.
Right, exactly. But now the modern Christianity has had Jesus so up high that you can't possibly do it anyway, so why try?
Yeah,
They made it completely magical rather than using his life as an example.
yeah.
I think in 1950s we actually had that in the sense of the way that they taught children, and maybe it was the issue was is that when I was in the 1950s I was in children's Sunday school,
Mm,
and I knew that the adults were doing different stuff.
mm.
They went into literally the hardcore, Paul in the Old Testament, but they left Jesus for the kids.
Jesus was
Yes,
a kid.
Jesus loves me.
Yeah. Oh, that's nice. They gave the grown-ups all the brimstone and hellfire. The kids got Jesus loves me. That's good.
Yeah, kids get Jesus loves me, but that doesn't last long. By the time you're in school, it's hellfire and damnation kind of stuff.
Mm.
So, uh, these actually, that song very powerful to give one that feeling of yes, I am loved, I am part of this, I am, acceptable.
Mm. That's the kind of psychological healing, right? That a lot of that's a big dimension of.
Well, here's the question: why did we ever get sick? Why can't we keep that?
Mm,
Because I'm seeing my own daughter at the age of 8; she's losing it.
mm. Yeah, it's the self-consciousness, isn't it, that children start to have, and
And all of the teachers and all of the rule following, you see, I don't have that much influence on her. That she's got teachers and mommies and Thai people all around. She's really good at Thai language, but her English, she's afraid of it. But that's another issue. The point that I'm making is that because I don't have that much control over her, if I lived in a cave with kitties, she'd be completely different. But that didn't happen. And
mm.
so she's buying the trip.
I think, though, to a certain extent, all children do need to do that, right? Like, they need to.
Be beat into shape like a plowshare, and then
No, no,
plow.
certainly not beaten into shape, but I mean, they need to buy the promise of their society. They need to feel like.
But the society, even, guess what? Other than something vaguely said like the quote, quote, American dream,
Mm,
or you can be president someday, or those kind of things, or whatever an individual culture has, generally, kids can see that, hey, wait a minute, everybody around me is in a hell of a mess.
mm,
How can I expect anything better than what I'm getting? And yet, all of society, television, the businesses, the religions, the government, everything is saying, oh, if you keep working hard, you can be successful.
mm.
And we keep working hard and we never feel successful.
Mm.
But the teaching of the Buddha is hey, man, Look at that feeling that you have of being unsuccessful. Sit down and deal with that.
Mm. But I think that there are certain aspects of the Buddha Dharma that children can't do. Like children,
Absolutely. The Dhamma is not for the feeble-minded, and we all start off feeble-minded.
yes, but also like it's like
And
in,
so that mind needs at least a little bit of exercise. In fact, I think that I would have a whole lot of difficulty being able to work with a student who didn't know how to read,
yeah.
but I've never had one. All of the students are well educated. All of the students are at least willing to give up magical thinking, as if they had either come out of a religion or were born of parents that had come out of a religion.
Mm.
And so now they're looking for the real deal. And so having that learning experience of being associated somewhat with the religion and getting over it and saying, hey, there's got to be something better than this because this makes me feel bad, not good.
Mm.
So you're right. I believe you. A child is not going to learn what fire is until he sticks his own hand in it.
Yeah, yeah, and they I feel like a child needs to see firsthand how the promises of their society are perhaps not the end of the road, not the satisfaction that they're promised, and during that time, a door needs to be kept open to something else, but you can't force the child through that door. You just need to kind of show
Well,
them.
they sell a hell of a package. They sell a major package.
Hmm, what society to children? The
Well, let us call it business. I mean, look at all the products that they have. What a package these products that business has to sell.
mm,
And here in Thailand, basically the businesses are closed and everybody's hurting. So
mm,
businesses make people happy in a way by giving them something to do because they've already been told, hey man, you got to go do something.
mm,
And if all the businesses are closed, nobody's doing anything. They
mm,
don't like it. Okay, so that's the ordinary mind. It's only when we come to the point of recognizing, hey, wait a minute, I was actually pretty good at all that doing and I still was dissatisfied.
mm,
That's the spark.
mm,
Or another way of saying it is that every big rocket, a Saturn V and SpaceX and all of this kind of stuff, to get a little tiny capsule up into orbit, they need this huge rocket that burns off in stages.
mm,
And we can actually say that that first major stage is to get that thing up into the air, to get us to adulthood, and that those booster rockets are not going to be there forever.
mm,
They're only there for a while, and then they burn off, and then they fall away. And
mm,
so the rocket then takes on and gets the real rocket engine that's going to actually take it on up. Okay, so things like that happen in stages. And
mm,
human development is like that. In fact, the Buddha talks about it in the sense of long view is that I can get away with anything. If you
mm,
take that to its logical conclusion, you have anarchy,
mm,
chaos, dog eat dog, and except in our case, it was human eating human and
mm,
human sacrifices, and then we went to animal sacrifices, and then we stopped doing that. We used to have slavery and beating people. Now we beat them with a paycheck to get them to behave.
mm,
Okay, so we're at least going in a softer direction as the rocket goes up, as a society, and that's marvelous. We're beginning to rely less and less upon magic. But believe me, the pharaohs got the pyramids built with magic. There was no
mm,
other way to do it. That Rome, that in fact Constantine, very big time, converting to Christianity because the Roman army had their own religion of Mithras.
yeah.
Okay, so It's all based on magic. That in fact, Muhammad was very, very clear of that, in the sense of, hey guys, it's time to go to battle. You've got to go to battle, and if any of you die, you will immediately go to heaven and have 72 virgins. Magical thinking, right? That's what got them into battle. They wouldn't go to battle otherwise; they might get killed, and then they don't like that. So it's all about magical thinking that got everything started. I agree with you completely, and that's why we both need the school systems and also recognize that it is truly flawed.
Yes, but there's also space. Remember, I'm a teacher. I think like there's a lot of space within the school system. You know, what I teach.
Let us say there's a lot of space within your mind. And you're taking advantage of that space, and you can treat the children better, but not every teacher is going to do that, because all the other teachers are going to train the kids the way that they were trained, because they haven't been, as we can say, woke yet.
I would say that the default in my school is a very nurturing, gentle style of teaching
How
where
many grades does it go?
it's year 3 to year 6, so they're 7 to 11.
Boy, those 11-year-olds have got a shock coming in.
They do. No, we know that they really do. The beginning of secondary school in England. Primary schools are very good in England. Secondary schools are very assessment obsessed. It's all about your quality, the exams you take when you're 16 and the exams you take when
Okay.
you're 18. And
Well, that's very interesting, because when I was a kid, it started at the age of 6, and it looks like with Montessori and a lot of other stuff that they've actually given the kids more of a childhood.
yes,
And it's only when they get into middle school and then high school is when they turn the screws.
yeah. Although, I mean, England compared to some other systems, you could say we relatively turned the screws earlier. Like in Scandinavian countries, it's basically all like they don't start school till 7. So 4 till 7, they're in these state nurseries, which is just all play and social. Like it's all about how to play in a rich, imaginative way
Right.
with other children and how not to be a dick to other children. And you know what I mean? Like it's just like social and play.
That's marvelous. I hope that they learn that they should do that until the kid's about 12 or 15.
Um, whereas in England, but then, whereas in England, there is a big emphasis on learning to read and write from when they start school, when they're 4 going on 5.
Uh-huh. Well, they've experimented with using, let us say, computer as a toy.
Mm.
So all the kid needs to do is learn a bit of basics, like turning the computer on, and this is a mouse, and this is a keyboard. And that kid just sitting with a computer will learn the alphabet. He'll learn how to write and type stuff in and get to websites and learn all kinds of stuff all by himself. And all he needs is encouragement.
Mm.
He didn't need a teacher standing in front of the class at all, ever.
Mm. But that, I'm personally, I think
Well,
young.
they're still experimenting with it. We haven't figured out how to educate our kids so that they wind up being both useful and happy.
Yeah.
No, we have to go through the useful stage, and then we get the happy. If we're lucky, we can find someone who can give us that spark.
Mm.
In a way, you could say that it's almost like, instead of the rocket, let's use the analogy that when we are born as a primitive being in a soup or a fog of a swamp. And it
Mm.
is our society that brings us up or to dry us out.
Mm.
But we still need the spark of the Dhamma in order to be really set on fire.
Mm.
And so that's the way of talking about it. And you're saying, yes, we do need that stage one. And I said, of course we do. I agree with you completely. We need to beat the hell out of those kids before we allow them to be happy. Otherwise, we'll never get a chance to teach them how to be happy. You'll be off someplace killing people, not interested in listening to you at all.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you have to come from wrong view to right view, and from right view to noble right view.
But yes, there's a way that all of that transition, all of those transitions can happen in a kind of nurturing, loving way, and it doesn't have to be.
Oh gosh, that's so unusual. I think I only know one person that it wound up that way, and that's
That
the
wound up,
Dalai Lama. Hmm.
what, as an educated that way.
Well, he was around monks, gentle monks, his whole
Yeah.
life.
Although there are cases of
Yeah,
total,
sometimes you don't get a good gentle monk.
yeah, um,
Sometimes he's a priest.
yeah.
And there's cultural things for sure. But yes, there are better ways to raise our kids. And in fact, the Christians know that, at least in their heart. That's why they want to have homeschooling. The problem is that at home is where the monsters are.
Mm. Mm.
So yes, I understand that there is that issue. That in fact, this is the whole concept of, is magic necessary in the Dhamma? The answer is yes, it is step one. You can't even get to the Dhamma without having magical thinking that then needs to be overturned.
Mm. I suppose at the beginning it is magical thinking. The idea that you can be happy is magical because you don't really have any. It's like it's a desperate hope at the beginning. It's only
No,
actually
we have also desperate memories of being happy when we were
yeah,
really little.
that we base it on. Yeah, maybe. But there does seem to be a journey where you start to kind of the skill development and the experience of seeing how those skills interact with reality to produce better ways of being. That is the shift, right? That's the time when you're coming out of seeing the Dharma as like this exotic magical thing, and it actually becomes this like
Never mind, be happy.
yeah.
Don't worry, be happy. Just dukkha dukkha nirodha. See what you're doing. And Bhikkhu Buddha Das, that was one of the favorite lines that he had with me. Just look at what you're doing.
Mm. Um, right. I want to have a conversation with you this week, and maybe the next conversation I speak with you about. Although, as I've said, leaning away from the the need to kind of conceptualize things, but on the other hand, I'm interested in
Ah,
exploring.
but guess what? The big it and the big all doesn't need much conceptualization. Just
No,
just one word will do everything. Or what a wonderful world! And it's the whole quality of expanding. And so it's dynamic in the first place. And so concepts are generally pretty rigid
mm,
structures, way things are. And so if we have to have an analogy, let it be a drawbridge, or maybe
mm,
a loaf of bread that's being broken open.
mm. To borrow a nice
And
Christian
another
metaphor.
one that I like very much is about a balloon, an aerial balloon, a hot air balloon that is about to leave the ground, maybe in Oz, with the Wizard of Oz on board or something. And the last thing that happens is that we cut that final cord, the
Mm,
tether, the last one. And then
mm,
we just kind of float up into the air. Okay, so that may be a nice visual image for you, is just letting go by cutting that cord, cutting that last rope. Now we just sort of float up into the air.
mm.
So these are the kind of things that you can have as imagery
Mm.
that are softer than a full-on concept.
Mm. I suppose what I'm sort of getting at is how those images point very nicely to that feeling and to that space without kind of tying it down. But how does that space relate to the idea of nirvana?
That's it. That is nirvana.
Mm.
The cooling off that happens when a pie is finally taken out of the stove.
Mm.
That's what the word means. It means cool,
Mm.
which also can be relaxed. Okay, so this is nirvana. Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has got a book, or at least a work that you can find called Nirvana for Everyone,
Mm.
where he talks about it in the sense of everybody's got little nirvanas. We're just
Mm.
not aware of them. And if we know what we're doing, which is what we're talking about this whole time, is nirvana,
Mm.
then we can get the right tools.
Mm.
Like, oh wow, this really is nirvana. Actually, the word nirvana was used in the time of the Buddha for two things. One was animal training, and the other one was like the pie coming out of the. When when you have food hot off the fire, you don't want to eat it. You want to let it nirvana,
Mm.
and that you don't want a wild dog. You want them a bit trained. You want to be able to control them a little bit. Down boy, you know, sit. But that's
Mm.
about all they need. They need just a little bit of training to be domesticated.
Mm.
Okay, so in a way, that's much of the nibbana that would have been done to a very wild animal or a wild creature, such as a human being, has
Mm.
been done by our culture. A lot of the nibbana process of cooling us off, but it did it with magical thinking. That if you don't settle down and shut up and cool down, we're going to beat the tar out of you.
Mm.
So that magical thinking then gives way to, oh, wow, yeah, I can just sit down and relax. I don't have to be driven by those feelings that I've got about what jerks they are and how I need to pay them back. Yeah, you'd believe that for a human being, we are really big on revenge.
Mm.
Really, really big on revenge. We like it.
Mm.
Payback. I'm going to get you. In fact,
Mm.
that's the whole source of the deep law of karma, in the sense that that old rich man robbed me and now he died naturally in a happy state with a good fortune and all of that. I'm going to have to invent something to get him back. Oh, hell. Right. He's going to go to hell. And therefore, hell is born because now I feel better because that old man that I hated is now in hell in my mind.
Mm. But in so doing, you've invented hell in your mind.
Right. Payback time.
Yeah, that will bite you on
If
the
you
arse.
invent a hell, you'll be in it for sure. And if you invent a paradise and invent a heaven, then you can be there too.
Mm. All right, Dhammarato. Thanks so much for talking.
All right. Well, we'll see you a little bit later. Go
Yeah,
let you, yeah, go have some of that open consciousness, that feeling.
yeah.